Going by the comments, a lot of you are more impressed with the X10 than the T9. Personally, I prefer the T9. X10, it's a very fun-loving sound. It's tuned for people who have not done serious listening. They just want a bit of bass. They want to sit by the swimming pool. They want to go to a barbecue. They want it to go loud. It's got to have some clarity. Okay, 2.5 kilohertz, and then we won't give you anything after that. You've never heard of harmonics. You've got no idea what you're missing. But hey ho, we've got a party speaker. I've got a party speaker. Doesn't have a lot of deep bass. What's the point of that, you're asking? And hang on a second. It's quite balanced for a party speaker. Yes, I know some of you have said it's massive. It's not massive. In fact, it's not massive. It's small enough for me to say, I can use that as a conventional speaker. Well, why would you do that, Al? I'll tell you why. It's got a left and right channel. It's not mono. It's actually got left and right separation. Yes. Oh, that's a shame. Look what they've done with the tweeters. They're both in the middle. So we're not fully left-right separated. And yes, there's no separation within the enclosure. But hey ho, we do have a left and a right channel. I do like to do that. Put it that way round. It's not my pound for pound world champion. So why do I like it? I'll tell you why I like it. It's got quite a big sound. It sounds bigger than the enclosure. I hope that makes sense to you. A lot of these speakers are quite boxy. It sounds the size of the enclosure. You think, yeah, it should do that. But hey ho, no, it's a stereo. We want it to escape its enclosure. For me, this does that. But oh, there's always a problem, isn't there? It hasn't got any deep bass. It's got mid bass, it's got upper bass. It's got very sparkly sound, but it's missing that deep bass. But do you know what? Because of the size of the sound, somehow I don't miss that. I do miss the deep bass, but it's not a huge issue for me because there's enough of the way it's presented, the details there, the sound stage is there. It's a big sound. It opens up the sound in a way I wasn't expecting to do. I thought it was going to be a party speaker. I thought I'd listen to it that way around. Even that way around, it's still a big sound. It's actually quite balanced. So hey ho, if you buy this as a party speaker, you might be disappointed. If you buy this simply as another speaker that's quite balanced, has a big sound, it opens up the track in a way you may not have quite heard it before on speakers that sort of size. Very sparkly, but maybe overly bright. But when we're talking about overly bright, that was hugely bright, the 2.5 kilohertz peak. And oh, they know what they're doing. They're just giving you just enough of what you probably want, but only if you've never done serious listening before. So I'll look at the actual specs. You know, about the same price. The X10 today, when I checked, £100. W-King T9, £115. They are not expensive speakers. What is it, £280 still for the JBL Xtreme price? 300 quid. Buy 3 of those for the, oh man, that's good value. 55.5 watt hour battery, 44.4 watt hour battery. Yes, of course, SBC codec, basic codecs. That's on Android, of course. Point out, you know, you go to, should be, if you go to Apple, an Apple device, you're looking at AAC, Bluetooth 5, both of them, both do stereo pairing, both have USB-C connections, both have an auxiliary input, both have an, 2021, both have an auxiliary input, can be used both as a power bank. The W-King X10 can be used as a phone speaker, but not the W-King T9. Come on, give us some proper names for these speakers, W-King. Both have a flash card slot. You can put a flash card in, play your music directly off the device. A lot of you, surprising to me, because it was not something I've used for 10 years, but a lot of you like that feature. Now, on paper, W-King T9 80 watts. I did say previously RMS. I think it's RMS, but you can never be sure when they come up with these specs. Definitely the 70 watts advertised on the W-King X10. At best, that's a 60 watt speaker. So 70 watt is clearly a peak. And in terms of weight, 3.7 kilos, 3 kilos. Ported. A lot of you disappointed it's ported because it's going to fill up with water. No IP rating at all. IPX6, not IPX7, which was a surprise to me given the fabric JBL Xtreme like coating. But hey ho, don't put that in your pool. In terms of what they're claiming, 60 Hz to 20 kilohertz, 80 Hz to 20 kilohertz. But as I said in the original video, They say extra clarity because it goes up to 40 kilohertz. The manual itself does not claim it goes past 20 kilohertz. 40 kilohertz is marketing rubbish, and nobody hears past 15 to 20 kilohertz. Some people claim even if you can't hear it and it goes past 20 kilohertz, you'd get some sense of an atmosphere. Look, listen, guys, nobody buying this speaker is going to start claiming they can hear some sense of atmosphere. A, because it rolls off from 2.5 kilohertz, and they're claiming it goes up to 40 kilohertz. That's nonsense. That shouldn't be in the marketing. And I hope you just know, has a massive, very narrow peak at 2.5 kilohertz. You're not going to get fantastically developed vocals on that, but you will get some clarity. Now, the actual woofers, 100mm woofers, 70mm woofers, 31mm woofers, 31mm tweeters, 31mm tweeters. Now, I say 31mm tweeters. I said 38mm in my previous video. I'm saying that now because the manual has different specs to what I'm reading on the net. I took it off the net, 38mm tweeters. The manual says 31mm tweeters. I don't know how many different companies are involved in these speakers. Clearly it's an issue, but I think I'm going to go by what the manual says for the actual specs, because all that matters at the end of the day is what it sounds like in terms of latency, Bluetooth latency. None of the W-Kings, none of them are any good. My cutoff point is 80 milliseconds, 160 milliseconds, 150 milliseconds. On my device, a Samsung X10, yet a Samsung 10 Plus, sorry, which I'm hoping to update at some point. But no, it's very device specific, but I don't have very good Bluetooth latency. You may have a different result. So, of course, they both have tweeters, as I said. W-King do not have an app. All you really want to know is how, come on, let's go. How do they compare side by side? T9 default mode, indoor mode. X10 default mode, also indoor mode. Outdoor modes on both of these speakers will just cut your bass and make it overly bright, but go slightly louder. The main difference is T9 extends right out into the harmonics range. The X10 has a massive peak, 2 kilohertz, and then a massive roll-off. It's a kind of smiley face, but a very narrow smiley face. Upper bass peak, 2 kilohertz peak, and then that rapid roll-off. T9, a bit more balanced. It's not really smiley face. There are big peaks and dips, but it does extend much further, and it's noticeably more balanced in the mids, with a slight peak, 300 Hz, the lower mids. That's going to help out the bass. Possibly a smaller roll-off after the peak, and possibly a smaller roll-off after the upper bass peak on the X10. Maybe a little bit more in the deeper bass compared to T9, which has more of a roll-off after its upper bass peak. Lowish volume, around 50%.
I feel like I be floating, I'm dying, they know it. Only see what I'm showing. They don't know what I've been through to get here right now. Almost quit like last year, I'm still stuck standing back here. You don't know what I've been through to get here, no. Fake friends wish death upon me, just let it go. I need a private island with nobody around me but my day ones. They all wanna be like me, but I don't give a fuck about what they are. I'm just trying to be myself, past pants with Louis Bell. I got expelled and they said I won't be shit. Now I get money way more than my teachers. I needed help but nobody would listen, so I started making my own decisions. I made a plan, I stuck to my vision. When everyone else quit, I stay here persistent. Even my friends hated all my shit. I'm standing up while you sitting down bitching. I don't reply, so call me to go. Oh, trust me, little bitch, I done made my position. I don't do this for the fame or the clout. Honestly, rather my name at your mouth. All our fam in the north and the south. Okay, there's a minute, we doing good now. Shout out to me when I switch to the team. There ain't a chance to go hold me down. Back of the beat, man, trying to keep it. Trying to leave it, I'm about to leave it. I don't want nobody around me, I can't trust a soul, no. I still got my whistle about me, keep my shit low key, though. Asking about a feature, but my shit costs like 2 kilos. Asking about your bitch, little boy, she stuck down on her knees. More money, more problems, more drugs inside my stomach. Even though I keep on running, I still end up on wanted. Miss Benzos with Cody, I feel like I be floating. I'm dying, they know it. Only see what I'm showing. More money.
If you really wanna go, knock yourself out. Go ahead. He's all yours now. You saw the way he treated me. He gave bruise and hurt you, you have a friend. Say I didn't want you, say I didn't want you, go. Knock yourself out. Go ahead, he's all yours now. You saw the way he treated me. He gave me up so easily. Knock yourself out. Go ahead, he's all yours now. Yeah, you deserve better than him. But if you're fine with settling, knock yourself out, knock yourself out. Knock yourself out. Don't come crying to me if it hurts you. Knock yourself out.
Kind of already alluded to the differences between these two speakers and my personal views on them. Nothing changes after that, listening to them. I would imagine for you, if you hear what I hear, at 50% volume. Yes, the W-King X10 actually has deeper bass than the T9, has about the same upper bass, and slightly better mid bass. So you're going to think, well, that's going to be massively the winner. But for me, no, that really doesn't sum up the differences in reality, because I've mentioned before, very wide sound, a very big sound, very big sparkly sound from the W-King T9. Problem, yes, if all you want is the bass, you're going to love the W-King X10 of these two speakers, but it's the vocals. There's a big problem with the vocals, and quite honestly, any sense of details outside of bass and the vocals at 2.5 kilohertz, because it's a very narrow smiley, so you don't really get a sense of details from the mids. You certainly don't get any of the upper treble, definitely don't get any of the harmonics. They claim it goes up to 40 kilohertz. That's somebody who's had a big night out and it's just, they've written down the first thing that comes in their head. I really hope you guys don't take any notice if you're reading, it says 40 kilohertz, that makes it clearer. No. That's clearer. The vocals, that's nicely balanced. That has nice vocals. There's width to the vocals. That's very, very narrow, very, very nasally, I would say, the vocal. They're there. For a lot of you, you're going outside, it's summer, you're going to love it, you're having a barbecue, you're going to love it because there is some clarity, because it's a massive thin 2.5 kilohertz peak, and you're getting your bass, and you're actually getting more deeper bass than you get on there. But it's not a massively wide sound. Put that on its side, you're going to get a massively wide sound, you're going to get a balanced sound, you're going to hear more in a track than you would hear from that, if that matters to you. Any type of serious listening, you're going to prefer the T9. But hey ho, on paper, there is more bass on the X10. But I find, because of the size of the soundstage, although it doesn't go that deep in the bass, you really don't miss that deep bass, because there's enough of the upper bass, the width of it. It's just open and big, and it's really nice. For £100, look, if that was 500 quid, I'd tell you to forget it. That's 100 quid. And if you want to open up the music and you just want to enjoy listening to a detailed and bubbly and fizzy sound, you're going to love the W-King T9. If you want a party speaker, you're going to hate that speaker. If you think you're going to get that because, listen to that. It's like T9, sounds like a tank on the name. Sounds like a tank if you hit it, but if you think it's going to be a party speaker and it's going boom, 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 no, it doesn't have the deep bass. That's not particularly heavy in the deep bass, but it has a lot more deep bass at these volumes than the W-King T9, so we're going to have to go louder. They're supposed to be party speakers, so you're never going to play at those volumes. We're going to go around 75%.
Come all to my domain, yeah. So let me break it all down for you. I ain't never giving up, I ain't never giving up. Taking that crown from you. I ain't worried about you, I ain't even. So let me break it all down for you. I ain't never giving up, I ain't never giving up. Taking that crown from you. I ain't worried about you, I ain't even. So let me break it all down for you. I ain't never giving up, I ain't never giving up. Taking that crown from you. I ain't worried about you, I ain't even. So let me break it all down for you. I ain't never giving up, I ain't never giving up. Taking that crown from you. I ain't worried about you, I ain't even make friends.
pa' cenar caliente, pa' ponernos indecentes. Pa' este plato tú tienes el ingrediente. Ven y te digo que se siente mal. Cuando me bailes tú me pones high. No uses Gucci, yo prefiero Nike. Te quiero pero con poquita light, 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 light. Díganle al DJ que le ponga más, o que se ponga a sudar. Pa' pasarla bien, ella se porta mal cuando suena el Paka, Paka. Díganle al DJ que le ponga más, o que se ponga a sudar. Pa' pasarla bien, ella se porta mal cuando suena el Paka, Paka.
I run on my own, leaving that place. Never felt there at home. Where I've been then, where I am now. Oh, I see it was all too much. It was all too much. Well, I used to cry in my father lied. Told me I'm strong. Broke his heart to know that I had to go. Feeling alone. Had to grow skin that no one in. It was all too much. It was all too much. Uh-oh, uh-oh. Well, I used to cry in my father lied. Told me I'm strong. Broke his heart to know that I had to go. Feeling alone. Had to grow skin that no one in. It was all too much. It was all too much. Oh, it was all too much.
So, what I would say the difference is between the speakers, and it's the same at low volume. Even the frequency responses would show there's no real bass adjustment or any adjustment. It's quite linear from low volume to high volume. So it remains consistent. And that means very sparkly sound on the W-King X10, but it's very thin. The vocals are very nasally. The vocals do not sound nice. They're certainly there. That may be all you want. And the deep bass is there and you go boom, 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 boom. But there's nothing else. There's no detail. There's no soundstage. There's certainly no harmonics. There's no atmosphere. It's very, very clinical. For me, it's way too thin. And there's almost the opposite of how I would describe the T9. And also, that for clarity, it relies on upper mids, lower treble. Whereas the clarity goes all the way up to the upper trebles into the harmonics on the T9. But they are very different speakers, aren't they? So that's quite a throw. That's kind of more of a travel speaker. That's something you could put in a suitcase, maybe not in a backpack. It's 3 kilos. It's pretty hefty. But that's something you're going to leave at home. You're not really going to travel with. So I'm comparing them side by side, but they are very different speakers. But I have to say, that's not a party speaker to me. They sell it as a karaoke speaker. They sell it as a package with a microphone. But to me, they've kind of missed, I don't know, a selling point in that they could have put the same innards in something more conventional speaker friendly, and it would sound really, really nice. But the marketing would suggest it's something other than it isn't, other than it is. So I thought it was a party speaker, but it isn't. But it's actually a speaker I really, really like because it's quite a big, detailed. It just opens up the sound. It really does. Whereas that's I can see loads of you, a load of you, probably some of you who are still at school, loving that, showing it to your mates, and it's oh yeah, bloody hell, oh cool, listen to that. But if you've any sense of listening or delving into the details of a track, ain't gonna get it from that. So people who are buying that really only want to know, what does it sound like with 100% maximum full out volume?
Everyone will break your heart. Why is it so
So no surprise, EQ modes on both these speakers go louder. That's the whole point. T9 is the loudest, but maybe a little bit of surprise. T9 in default mode is actually louder than EQ mode on the X10. And possibly the reason for that is there's a more of a dramatic cut in the bass on the T9. EQ mode, minus 23, minus 19, that's 4 dB down. And on the X10, it's a 3 dB cut in the bass. So slightly less cut in the bass on the X10, holds on to more bass. Therefore, T9 in default mode, still louder than the X10. It does have more power anyway, the T9, but neither of the EQ modes are very pleasant to listen to. Cuts the bass, ups the high end, it's screechy. So default mode versus default mode, we're just over a decibel louder on the T9. Peaks about the same, in fact, exactly the same on my measurement. And the X10 actually holds on to more of the deep bass, while the T9 overall has more bass. Deep bass on the X10 is 2 decibels up on the T9, and they're about the same in mid bass. So obvious difference. T9 upper bass heavy, but the X10 still advantage and quite obvious to the ear. A deep bass now, not so much of the highs. It still has that 2 kilohertz peak, but compared to the T9 doesn't sound now so overly bright. In fact, the T9 may be edging on the overly bright. It's certainly a lot clearer. You can still see that massive roll off. 4 kilohertz is basically the cutoff point on the X10, whereas we're extending right up into the harmonics on the T9. And if you look at the 200 hertz mark, you can see how much stronger the T9 is in terms of the upper bass. We're looking at 200 hertz here, and that's minus 24 at that line. It's heading up to minus 20 at the actual 200 hertz mark. So a big difference in how these two speakers sound at maximum volume. So maximum volumes. For me, the difference is actually surprisingly narrow. No longer, by comparison, does this sound more shrill than the W-King T9. It does hold on to more deeper bass, although the W-King T9 overall does have more bass thanks to hefty upper bass. So they have about the same mid bass. That has more upper bass. That has more low bass. For me personally, I prefer low bass. I'm now edging towards W-King X10. It still has that problem of that nasally, very sharp. To me, too sharp, shrill, abrasive treble or vocals, where it's more pleasant, more sparkly, more nice on the T9. I would say at maximum volume, it's a draw. Lower volumes, for me personally, the T9 has the advantage. It's a more open sound, but it doesn't have the deep bass. If you just want deep bass, then you would go, or even the form factor, really, you'd go X10. So for me, what was the main advantages for the T9? Diminish at maximum volume. And if you're really just looking for something to be played by the pool, although technically the T9 does go 1 decibel, I should point out, by the way, the EQ modes on all these W-King speakers go about a decibel louder if you use them, but they're not very pleasant, not very nice. To me, go about a decibel louder, but you're losing about 3 to 4 decibels in the bass, not worth it. So we're talking about default modes. T9 is a decibel up, but it just doesn't have that deep bass. If they just tuned that with a bit more deep bass, that would be a winner, winner, winner all the way. But we do have the deep bass on the X10, and I wish they'd tuned it a bit more subtly. Well, it didn't have that massive 2.5 kilohertz peak, and it didn't have that massive roll off after that. But hey ho. And my problem with this is you can't pick it up with your hand because it's Toblerone shape, because it's a triangle shape. You got to use the strap, and you may think that's a small point, but to me that's actually an issue. That I have to leave the strap on. I can't do that. Not only is it slippery, it's not very friendly. I can pick up the JBL Xtreme 3. I can't pick up that one. I think it's a draw, maximum volume. So I think overall, what I'm trying to get over is, other than maximum volume where it's a draw, any type of serious listening, you're going to go for the T9. But if you're doing serious listening, you're probably not looking for that sort of form factor. But however, having bought that speaker, because I thought it was a party speaker and people asking me about it, I found it worked quite nicely on its side. Was surprised it actually is left and right separation. Shame about the tweeters in the middle. For me personally, X10, given what you guys were telling me, I found this a bit of a disappointment. I understand why a lot of you really like it. It does everything, because you don't need a lot other than I want to hear some bass, I want to hear some clarity, and I want to hear some volume. in a JBL-like form factor, although it doesn't have the JBL in-your-face logo. In fact, it's quite a subtle, small logo, even for W-King. Whoever W-King are, and why do they give the same numbers to different types of speakers from years ago? And why don't they give them proper names instead of just numbers? I don't know. Hey ho, this has been my comparison, the X10 versus the T9. And I thank you for watching.
I ain't about that life. I ain't about that life. Ain't no project wife, got my logic right, cause I'm not your type. I ain't about that life. I ain't about that life. Sorry, ma, I ain't get it right. I'ma just live my life. I ain't about that. I ain't about that life.